Mini episode 1520 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the FDH Lounge. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here with my good friend, fellow FDH Lounge Original Dignitary Chris Galloway. We've had a series here going through previewing the NFL division by division this year. And again, go back to the first one if you want to hear our macro level thoughts for the season, the one we did on the AFC East. And then from there, it was division by division, 8 of those ones. This is the 9th segment that we are doing, where we are giving you our playoff predictions. We went through every division. We told you what to look for. In many cases, we indicated who we thought was going to win the division and or be wild card teams. But as far as connecting all of the dots for what I see, for what Chris sees, our predictions for the season, we're bringing it together in this segment here with the AFC. We'll start with that one, and this is one where I'm just going to say, Chris, I know you probably don't see it quite the same way I do because of our discussion about the AFC West and your sense that Denver may outright overtake Kansas City. But for me, Kansas City and Buffalo, I've been going back and forth. I see them as being the best teams in the conference. Both of them have very, very brutal schedules. Basically here, what it comes down to for me is Kansas City has a tougher schedule the first part of the season, and that is sort of a determinant for me between Buffalo and Kansas City. But like a lot of people, I see those as being the top 2 candidates to come out of the AFC.
I think that's a good prediction. Just to recap my playoff teams in the AFC. I have Bills, Denver, Baltimore, and Colts, with Kansas City, Chargers, and Bengals as my wild cards. So that's who I have. And again, like I said, I have Raiders coming in close. A couple other teams, nipping at it, like the Browns potentially. But I see the Bengals being the ones to sort of sneak in just because of Burrow magic. So how I see that playing out is I see the Bills and probably, and I'm going to stick with it, Denver in the AFC Championship game.
Okay.
With the Bills finally getting through and making it to the Super Bowl, and so they're my pick for AFC champion. Again, pretty chalk how everybody kind of expects it to go, but again, I think by and large this team. Again, the NFL is a quarterback league, right? You go as far as your quarterbacks will take you.
That's right.
And that's why I have Kansas City, San Diego, and the Bengals getting into the playoffs because of their quarterbacks.
Right.
And then the Colts getting in because of their division, but they're not getting far. Same thing with the Ravens. They eke out the North with 9 wins. They get in. But at the end of the day, who do you believe to get through that gauntlet? I believe in Russell Wilson, and I believe in Josh Allen and that roster right now. And I'll take the Bills at home in the AFC Championship game to get a win over Denver and finally get into the big game in the AFC.
That would be an incredible AFC Championship game. I have what I think would be an incredible AFC Championship game as well. And I know it because it's what we saw a year ago. It was the best game in the playoffs. But to get from here to there, again, you and I agreed on all of the division winners except the AFC West. I, like most of the rest of the world, have Kansas City. I agree with you on Indianapolis, Baltimore, and, of course, Buffalo as divisional winners. My 3 wild cards, Miami, Cincinnati, and Denver. So in looking at this here, I'm going to go granular here week by week. The wild card playoffs, number 2, Kansas City over number 7, Cincinnati. avenging the AFC Championship game. I have it being, some might consider this an upset. I don't know that I would, but number 6, Denver over number 3, Baltimore. Number 5, Miami over number 4, Indianapolis. So that takes us into the divisional round, and that's where I have your AFC Championship matchup a week early, which the funny thing is, I think that's how it was a year ago, because I think you had Browns Chargers in the AFC Championship game, and I had it in the divisional round. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah,
that's
same
exactly
thing
right.
A year later. I have number 1 Buffalo over number 6 Denver, and in the other one, number 2 Kansas City over number 5 Miami, in a rematch of what was it? I think the 1971 Christmas Classic in the AFC playoffs. And then on Championship Sunday, number 1 Buffalo over number 2 Kansas City. A little bit of vengeance for last year's divisional round loss, and a chance to set things right for the Bills. So both of us have the Bills making it to the Super Bowl coming out of the AFC. Although, again, for any Bills fans that might be too celebratory about that, a year ago, you and I were figuring, both of us, that it would be the Browns coming out of the AFC. So, Bills fans, temper your enthusiasm. But,
well, exactly right. We both thought last year was it for the Browns, and womp womp.
That's right. And although, again, if you're Buffalo, I know it's always easier to be prisoner in the moment, but I think it's probably easier to be having a good amount of confidence in this pick with Buffalo this year, and where they sit and where Josh Allen is in his stage of development. In the NFC, I believe it's the same thing. I think we agreed on 3 of the divisional winners. We certainly did on the Rams and Green Bay and Tampa Bay. I said Dallas, but you said Philadelphia in the East, right?
That's correct. I've got Philly eking out over the Cowboys.
Okay. I've got Philly as a wild card, and I've got Minnesota and San Francisco as the other 2 wild cards, with Arizona just narrowly getting aced out by the Vikings in a tiebreaker. So I'll give you the granular thing in a second. I had to reset from what my predictions were in Fantasy Football Draftology 2022, available on the main page at fantasydrafthelp.com, because in the course of the preseason, I've gotten to be a little bit more down on Dallas. And to be honest with you, in the course of doing our divisional previews, I actually flipped it in my head in real time who I think's coming out of the NFC, because I was going to say Tampa Bay, but you kind of put something in my head there with the way you were kind of negging them a little bit, and you convinced me on that. But it's a thing where I think when you look at the top of the NFC, as I throw it to you for your predictions, it's interesting because at the top of every division, you have teams that are really very much flawed. And when you look at the AFC, whether it's Buffalo, Kansas City, Denver, any of the teams like that in there, I just don't see in the NFC. When you're looking at, Dallas or Philadelphia, we could sit here all day talking about flaws. But even Green Bay, Tampa Bay, and the LA Rams, the traditional powers of the last couple of years in the NFC, you could sit here and you could say, yes, well, the Rams were the Super Bowl team and, they did win. But even then, it was maybe a supercharged version of stars and scrubs, because the Rams still had a couple of holes in there. And now they have another hole on the offensive line with having to replace the retiring Andrew Whitworth. So whoever you're picking coming out of the NFC, whoever I'm picking coming out of it, it's interesting because these are all teams that you could make very compelling cases against as well as for, versus in the AFC it seems to be, there's a couple of really, really, really good teams, but I got to pick one of them.
Oh, no doubt. The AFC was so hard, especially when you're, on the wild cards, right?
Right.
It's just like somebody's gonna eke it out on a tie break.
Yep.
And get in. Somebody good staying home.
Right.
And I kind of had that with the Bengals, Browns, Dolphins. Like, who am I taking?
Right.
And I just went with quarterback play. The things that I've always preached, right? When I start looking at a team and what their kind of season they're looking at, I start by looking at the lines, both the defense and offensive line. How are they in the trenches? And then it's a quarterback-driven league, so you get as far as your quality quarterback. Browns, they're just going to have quarterback problems this year. That's where they're at.
Yep.
And so I've got to take Joey Burrow over them.
Yes.
I've got to take Joey Burrow over Tua.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go with Burrow to get them in. Even though I do, if they win the division again, I wouldn't be shocked. And then then you flip it, and Baltimore's is the wild card. Either way, I don't have either one of them making it to the AFC Championship. I didn't seed it all out in sort of my plotting the way you did, but
okay.
I just don't see either one of those teams actually mattering in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So it's similar in the NFC in the sense that it is easier for us to just sit and poke all the holes and point out all the flaws in these NFC teams. I mean, that's easier than saying, boy, who's any good?
Right.
It's so much easier to be like, well, they all suck in some way.
Right.
We have the same division winners. I've got Philly, you've got Dallas, but I do have the Cowboys getting in as a wild card.
And I have the Eagles as a wild card.
Yeah. So again, we end up in a similar place, right? Whether you're the last division, the fourth division one, or you're the second or third wild card, whoop-de-doo.
Right.
Neither the Eagles or the Cowboys are going to matter when it eventually matters in the NFC.
Right.
I also have, and again, I don't feel great about these picks because how could you? I do have, unlike you, I do have the Saints still just kind of having enough of a roster and a core to be, 9-8 and get in.
Okay.
And then I have the 49ers getting in over the Cardinals because I still think the Cardinals are a team that could nosedive. San Francisco, in my opinion, has more talent. Keeping Jimmy G around as a safety blanket probably is what made me pick them over Arizona and kind of have to think that through after they made that move today.
I didn't hear the Lions anywhere in there.
You didn't hear what? The Lions? I told you. I told you 8-9. They're not making the playoffs.
All right.
They're a surprise second-place team in that division.
Okay.
They're not making the playoffs. They are not making the playoffs. So
okay.
So that's I've got the Saints, Cowboys, San Francisco in there in the wild card. I have it ultimately shaking out to be LA and Green Bay in the NFC Championship game, and I have LA going back because, and I say that sort of like what are you going to pick? I mean, I don't think any of these teams are particularly compelling, to be honest. And I think LA they've got enough talent that I think they will repeat and go back. So you'll have Rams-Bills.
Well, and that's the opening game of the season. And so that would make it the closing game as well, which is probably pretty rare. And funnily enough, and I'll tell you how I get from here to there, I agree with you. And I think it is going to be both the first and last game of the season, Rams and Bills. How we get from here to there, when I did Fantasy Football Draftology 2022 predictions, I had Dallas as the number one seed because I thought, look, they've got such an easy schedule that it even if whatever issues they still have doesn't matter. But with everything that's happened since, I've got them coming back to the pack. They're still going to win that division. But they're not going to have as high of a seed. So I have Green Bay getting the bye as the number one seed because schedule-wise, I think it sets up that way. Second easiest schedule to Dallas among the top NFC teams here. Although Philadelphia, if you consider them to be a serious contender or not, probably depends on how you define the word serious. Philly's got a very easy schedule also, too, which is one of the primary reasons I'm picking them to be back in the playoffs. So the matchups for the wild card round, I have Tampa Bay over Minnesota in the 2-7. In the 3-6, I have the Rams over the Eagles. And in the 4-5, it's going to be Groundhog Day for all those poor Cowboy fans as San Francisco once again goes into Jerry World and beats them. So that takes us to the divisional round. And this is one where I go back and forth on this between number 1 Green Bay, number 5 San Francisco. As we saw last year, the thing that is extremely amusing is that of the two teams, San Francisco is by far the better cold weather team with the style that they play versus Green Bay feels like a wussy dome team with their whole finesse style here. But I do see Green Bay getting over in a nail biter, and in the 2-3 of Tampa Bay and the Rams. This is where what you said had an effect on me, Chris, because my sense was I was going to pick the Bucs to bounce back. with the thought being that the Super Bowl hangover year was out of the way, versus the Rams have now potentially got the Super Bowl hangover. But you make an interesting point. I guess I still, at the end of the day, have less questions about the Rams than I do anybody else in the NFC. So I've got the Rams over Tampa, and then the Rams going into Lambeau and winning the NFC Championship game there. So you and I both agree that it would be Bills and Rams in the Super Bowl. And the game that NBC unsurprisingly picked as the opening game for the season, the Thursday nighter, and one where there weren't a lot of great options if you look at the Rams' schedule. There weren't a lot of super compelling matchups there, so that one had to be the Vegas leader in the clubhouse probably through most of the offseason before it was announced. So that's the game that starts the season. You and I will be watching it very, very closely for hints as to what might happen for the rematch that we see coming up in February. That rematch would be in Glendale, Arizona, a stadium that the Rams go to every year and the Bills do not. So I don't expect that to necessarily play in. But then again, familiarity the last 2 years in the Super Bowl, the Rams winning in their home stadium, Tampa winning in their home stadium. So the last 2 years' familiarity may or may not have played a role. This would be it to a lesser degree, just that they go there every year. But before I tell you how I see it playing out, how would you see such a Super Bowl playing out?
So it's funny that we have the same Super Bowl matchup.
Yeah.
I think it's the Bills. I think that this whole, the NFC is the weaker conference, and then like last year they turn around and win the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the AFC had just the superior teams top to bottom, in the end it's only one, right?
Right,
but,
and it's way more pronounced now. It's way more pronounced at this point.
Oh, it's way more pronounced, and I just like where the Bills are at as a roster,
mm-hmm.
right? I mean, as long as, and obviously all this is predicated on Allen staying healthy,
right?
If Allen is healthy, that roster and some of their ads like Von Miller and I just like where they are. I think they've got a lot of talent on that team. A lot.
Right.
And I think and I like their coaches, and I think they are overdue for getting one. As a franchise, and for how they built that team and stuck with their coaches and stuck with their beliefs, they're just overdue, in my opinion. And I think that they're going to get it. I think that they're going to get it done. I think had they gotten through, which they should have, past Kansas City, they would have wiped the floor with Cincinnati last year and beaten the Rams last year. I think that allowing Patrick Mahomes 13 seconds or whatever the hell it was, was just an unforced, mitigated disaster.
Yep.
I truly believe they would have manhandled the Bengals and then beaten the Rams. And I think those guys know it. I think they know it. They went on the road, played their guts out, and they had the Chiefs. Had it. So I think this is the year they get it done. I think they knew they had it last year. I like what they did to add parts and pieces. I think by the time we get to week 3, we won't be talking about their now former punter. And I like them to win it.
I agree, actually. Even when I had it as Bills-Bucks, I had the Bills winning. I'm going to stick with the Bills now that I'm saying Bills-Rams. I'll say maybe about 27-20. I see it the same way that you do. It feels like it's their time, and if they play the Rams, it is a thing where I'm only going to compare this in the media narrative sense, because the media loves its narratives. 20 years after Gruden versus the Raiders in the Super Bowl could be Von Miller versus the Rams in the Super Bowl. How about that?
Hey, that would be fun if Von Miller gets back-to-back rings.
Yeah.
And how about, what if his former original team gets the AFC Championship?
Yes.
As I am predicting. So, and also personal plug, my recent college graduate daughter, in her first job out of college, is currently on the team that is designing his new home out in Buffalo.
Really?
So that's one of her current projects. So I don't know. Does she get a Super Bowl ring if she picks out some good curtains and some nice furniture?
Absolutely should be. Yes. I'm going to vote yes.
No, I just, and I'm going to guess that, your switch from the Bucs is because of what I said about that O-line. Am I right about that? Was it my concerns about that stability?
Maybe that, but just what you said about Brady, that feels like he's kind of mailing it in more so than he was. And it's a thing where I could see this being the case, because this happens a lot of times in life, of where when somebody's got you in too tight of a cocoon, like Belichick had him in all that period of time, and then you escape it and you have some success, and then maybe what comes after that is megalomania of like, oh, well, I don't really need any limits on me. I kind of proved it at this point. And maybe he's at that stage of acting out. And I think my concerns about that didn't really reach a crescendo till I heard you say what you said. So for my dad and anybody else in life that says, I never listened to anything, here you're wrong, because you convinced me on that point there. And I think, again, you talk about quarterbacks being tone sitters, and the tone that he is setting there for Tampa Bay, missing his time for, depending on what you believe, whether it be Masked Singer, plastic surgery, all of the above, whatever it is, it's not a focus on winning and what it's going to take to get through the NFC. You know, and I know that the NFC is as thin as it's been in a long time, if ever. But come on, man, you can't just mail it in completely.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I mean, and that's been my analysis of Brady. I think he is kind of just checked out and mailing it in. Now, I mean, look, he's a competitor. He's going to get into the season and he's going to play hard.
Right.
But his off-season, not giving a shit, everybody in that locker room now knows that he tried to go to force his way out to Miami.
Right.
Like, they all know he never wanted to be in Tampa Bay. They all know it. Even the year they won it, they all know that he originally wanted to be in Miami.
Right.
And now we also know before that, because he negotiated that before he left the Patriots, on the way out the door, he also was negotiating going to the Raiders.
Right.
And that Derek Carr was the guy that he was referring to when he said they'd rather go with that bleeper than me.
Right.
We now know it was the Raiders. I mean, everyone in that locker room knows that, like, the Tampa Bay was his third choice.
Right.
So, I mean, they got a ring, but now he's blowing off he caused their coaches to be, coach to be fired. And then he blew off the off season and he showed up late to camp. I mean, none of that's going to go over well.
Right.
No one's going to dare say anything because it's Tom.
Right.
Right? But we all know that eats away in a locker room. And if he has a couple bad games now at 45, that shit, oh, man, it ain't going to go well.
Yeah, but you talk about this.
Again, I'm picking them because of talent to get, in the lack of talent in that division. But, if he was if they were in the NFC West, I would be picking the Bucs to be the team that would collapse.
Oh.
And be sort of, but I think that the weak division, et cetera, is going to save them, right? I mean.
Right. Well,
yeah. And look, they still have enough weapons to win enough games. But there's just no way I would bet on them to go to the Super Bowl because Tom's checked out mentally. And again, my other concern beyond that is just that offensive line. Well, that offensive line that could be a real problem for them this year.
Well, as far as what you mentioned about Arians getting fired, deciding to quit and spend more time with his family, there was the whole thing of, if you go back to the first year, I don't remember what it was exactly, but like Arians made a point at one time. I think he was bristling about the whole thing of like, oh, Brady loves playing in a place that's looser and where he's at. I think like Arians was feeling a little bit insecure about that because there was something that he said where he let it be known how he chewed his ass out or something like that. I don't remember the specifics, but it's a thing where best believe Tom Brady didn't forget that. If there's one reason for what happened, it was probably that. It was probably that indiscreet moment of lording your coach status over the quarterback. And, Well,
I think also Arians, there were a couple of weeks where he literally called out Tom.
That's what I mean, yeah.
He literally called him out on some stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I'm the coach kind of thing. And to your point, it wasn't that he didn't allude to chewing him out. I mean, he just let it slip right in the middle of a press conference. Like,
right.
Quarterback play's got to get better. He didn't even call him by his name. He's treated him like he was, like the old Belichick, like quarterback has to. You're right. You're right. And there's no way that we all know in that championship season that there was a stretch where they weren't getting along.
Right.
I mean, that was rumored, right? It was out there. People were talking about, like, well, there's rumors that they're not really getting along. And then they both came out and were like, that's nonsense, yada, yada, yada. And then they won, and everybody was like, oh, it must have been nonsense. Well, it wasn't nonsense.
Yeah. I hope it was worth it to Arians.
They still managed to win.
Yeah. I hope it was worth it to Arians to have his moment there of looking like a big man at Brady's expense, because anybody that was looking at that situation and who knows where the power lies in this league, it was not a big shock to anybody that it ended up going down this way. Maybe that it happened on this timeline as opposed to another year out. But at the end of the day, he signed his own death warrant when he did that back at that time.
Well, that's correct. And then last year, I mean, look, the Bucks had that game. They had that game, and they choked it away.
Yeah.
So, they could have advanced to the NFC Championship game and probably should have if they don't choke it away.
Very possibly.
So, they got to be kicking themselves, too, also saying, my God, we were right there for a second season in a row. We just blew it.
Yeah.
But I think that right after that loss, that's, Tom played well in that game. And I think that, the D let him down, and I think that's when he checked out, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think he just went, he's like, I want to go to Miami, I want to be an owner, I want out of here, blah, 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 and then I'm going to retire, and then, it all went, sort of sideways with all the Flores stuff, and that all broke, and then he had to run away from it, and, and so now it's just like, I don't think he's got the same respect in that building that he had, and I don't think anybody wants to say it.
Right.
But, I mean, I understand how players and how men are in general, right? And there's no way any of that went over well with any of his teammates.
Oh,
so
exactly.
He's Tom Brady. He's the GOAT. But this will be his. I predict this is his last year in the league.
Well,
this is it.
Also, too, on field, off field, whatever, Gronk has been a security blanket, and for once, it looks like Gronk is retiring and sticking to it, unlike Brady. So there's that as well. He doesn't have Gronkowski in there as well, whether it be on the field.
I think Gronk knows Tom is done, right? I think that's why Gronk, and he's just not going to say that.
Right.
But I think Gronk knows, like, if I knew Tom was all in and was, like, screaming at us in the off season to work harder, and he's, and we're working out and, and preparing and doing all this stuff because we should have won that game and da-da-da-da. But he's not. He knows Tom. They're friends. He's not seeing that, and so what he sees is Tom is checked out, and he realizes, oh, that's it. Tom's going to go through the motion, get the paycheck, one more season, and be done with it.
Imagine having Gronk think you're not taking it seriously enough and too committed to the party lifestyle. That's going to leave a mark.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, that's right. When Gronk's critical.
Yeah, this isn't Belichick.
Gronk think Tom no serious.
It's a little different than hearing it from Belichick, is it not?
Yeah, it really has to be. And again, I just think that's all that's going on, and I think that's between that and their O-line problems, I just think they're just doomed.
Yeah.
This year. Now, they say doomed. They're making the playoffs because of their division, but they aren't making it to the Super Bowl. This is not a Super Bowl roster. Like you said, I have more faith in what the Rams have overall.
Yeah.
In the NFC, which is poor anyway.
Yeah. Than
anybody, and which is why I have them getting back. But that's really the only reason why, right? Because the rest of that conference is weak.
Yep.
And the Packers don't seem capable of winning a big game.
Right.
Philly's unproven. Dallas is, they're a choker. I don't know what San Francisco is with the quarterback situation.
Right.
I mean, there's just no way to bank on anybody else.
Right.
It's just kind of like, well, I'm going to go with Rams by default, and then I like the Bills to fight their way out of what is a brutal AFC, and then I like them to finally get over the hump for the city of Buffalo and justify that massive stadium deal.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because as I'm looking at this here, you and I have 6 of the same 8 divisional winners. 6 of the 8 are the same, and as far as wild cards go, I think so. In the AFC, I have Miami making it, and you have the Chargers in the NFC, I have the Vikings making it versus you have it being New Orleans, but we only differ on 2 teams in either conference here, so a lot of the same kind of a thing here as we look at it, but we will see. It's going to be...
That's not surprising, though. I mean, you and I have a very similar worldview, and just so everybody at home knows,
right,
we don't talk about this until just now.
Right, yeah.
We have not, Rick giving me his playoff teams and his predictions and me sharing mine. This is the first either one of us are hearing about what each other thinks.
Right.
But, you and I tend to analyze things similarly,
yeah,
by and large.
Evidence-based.
Right, and so I'm not surprised that we have, mostly the same teams in the playoffs in both conferences, and obviously then we end up with both the same teams in the Super Bowl. So
yeah, and that's how we see it playing out for this year. So it will be a very interesting campaign as always. Any other closing thoughts on the 2022 season, Chris?
Can't wait. Just ready for football, my friend. College has started, thank God.
Yep.
And, it's been a long, lonely period of time, without football. So,
right.
Thank goodness it's back.
Exactly, yes. Cue the Kid Rock. It's been a lonely road of faith waiting for the NFL to come back, but here we are. Week 1, not too far away here, and we will be, of course, taking a peek back in together once the season gets going here at different intervals. So thank you, Chris, for your part in this entire series here this year, as with the case with past years. Very much awesome going through all of this with you. Thank you so much, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in to our playoff preview for the NFL this year, as well as the divisional previews that preceded this.